Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. Walk into any faculty lounge in America, pour a cup of stale coffee, and ask a simple question. What are we doing here? You'll get a dozen different answers. Some will say, we are preparing the workforce of tomorrow. Others might talk about standardized test scores, hitting benchmarks, or ensuring students can read at grade level. But if you press harder, if you ask what education is really for, at its core, the room often goes quiet. This is where critical pedagogy steps in. It's the elephant in the room that asks whether schools are just factories churning out compliant workers, or if they are spaces where we build a true democracy. It challenges the idea that education is neutral. It argues that every syllabus, every seating chart, and every standardized test is political. This isn't just about abstract theories cooked up in ivory towers. It's about the real, messy, and vital work of teaching. We are going to unpack critical theory and its educational offspring, critical pedagogy. We'll trace its roots from European philosophy to the Brazilian countryside, and finally to the diverse, complicated classrooms of the United States. We're going to look at this through the lens of educators who believe that teaching is an act of love and an act of resistance. Before we can talk about what happens in a high school history class, we have to look back at where these ideas came from. Critical theory didn't start with education. It started with a group of philosophers in Germany known as the Frankfurt School during the 1920s and 30s. Thinkers like Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, and Herbert Marcuse were watching the world fall apart. They saw the rise of fascism in Europe and the crushing weight of capitalism, and they realized that the old ways of thinking, traditional Marxism or simple scientific observation, weren't enough to explain why people were acting against their own best interests. They coined critical theory to distinguish their work from traditional theory. Traditional theory tries to understand the world as it is, like taking a snapshot. Critical theory, on the other hand, wants to break the camera. Its goal isn't just to describe society, but to change it. They were obsessed with the idea of ideology, the invisible stories we tell ourselves that keep the powerful in power and the powerless in check. When these thinkers fled the Nazis and landed in the United States, they turned their gaze toward American culture. They saw a different kind of control, not the boot on the neck, but the numbing comfort of mass media and consumerism. They argued that society was being dumbed down to stop people from asking hard questions. While they weren't writing lesson plans, they laid the groundwork for the idea that knowledge isn't just a collection of facts, it's a battleground. If the Frankfurt School laid the foundation, Paulo Freire built the house. Freire is the grandfather of critical pedagogy. Working with illiterate peasants in Brazil in the mid-20th century, Freire realized that teaching people to read words was pointless unless you also taught them to read the world. In his landmark book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Freire dropped a bomb on the educational establishment. He famously described traditional education as the banking model. In this model, the teacher is the account holder filled with knowledge, and the students are empty piggy banks. The teacher deposits information into the students, who patiently receive, memorize, and repeat it. We see this all the time in American schools. It's the lecture where students frantically take notes without looking up. It's the multiple-choice test where there is only one right answer, and it's the answer the teacher gave yesterday. Freire said this method is toxic. It dehumanizes students. It teaches them that they don't know anything, that their life experiences don't matter, and that their job is to adapt to the world as it is, not to change it. Freire proposed problem-posing education instead. In this setup, the teacher and student are partners. The teacher isn't the sole authority. They are a facilitator. They present the material not as static facts, but as problems to be solved. They ask, why is it this way, and who benefits from this? This shift turns the classroom from a factory into a forum. It's about conscientização, a Portuguese term usually translated as critical consciousness. It means learning to perceive social, political, and economic contradictions and taking action against the oppressive elements of reality. So, how does this translate to the average Tuesday in an American school? It starts with recognizing the hidden curriculum. The official curriculum is what's in the textbook: algebra, the Civil War, molecular biology. The hidden curriculum is what schools teach by how they are run. It's the lesson that says, sit down, be quiet, and wait for permission to speak. It's the bell schedule that teaches us time is rigid and fragmented. It's the fact that in many history books, the people in power usually look a certain way, reinforcing the idea that history is made by great men rather than movements of people. This connects to the concept of hegemony, a term popularized by the Italian theorist Antonio Gramsci. Hegemony is the way the ruling class maintains control, not by force, but by consent. They make their worldview seem like common sense. In schools, hegemony looks like the unquestioned belief that standardized testing is the only objective way to measure intelligence. It looks like the tracking systems that disproportionately funnel low-income and minority students into remedial classes, while wealthier students end up in AP and honors. Critical pedagogy asks us to pull back the curtain on these practices. It demands we ask, why do we value this knowledge over that knowledge? Whose stories are missing from the library shelves? When a teacher embraces critical pedagogy, they stop pretending to be neutral. They acknowledge that choosing not to talk about racism, poverty, or inequality is, in itself, a political choice. It's a choice to support the status quo. When Freire's ideas migrated north to the United States, they were picked up by scholars like Henry Giroux, Peter McLaren, and Michael Ackel. They took the revolutionary spirit of the Brazilian peasantry and applied it to the context of American capitalism and neoliberalism. Henry Giroux, for instance, talks a lot about the teacher as intellectual. He argues that American education has de-skilled teachers, turning them into technicians who just follow the manual. You see this with scripted curriculums, where a teacher is told exactly what to say on day 42. Giroux says this is dangerous. Teachers need to be transformative intellectuals who combine scholarly reflection and practice in the service of educating students to be active citizens. Michael Apple's work focuses on the relationship between schools and the economy. He looks at how schools are increasingly being run like businesses. We talk about students as customers and education as a product. We see the encroachment of corporate interests into the classroom. Channel One News, sponsored educational materials, the push for charter schools run by private entities. Critical pedagogy pushes back against this marketization. It insists that education is a public good, not a commodity to be bought and sold. These theorists argue that schools in the U.S. are contradictory sites. They aren't just tools of oppression, they are also places where resistance is possible. A single teacher closing their door and opening their students' minds can make a massive difference. You cannot talk about critical pedagogy in America without talking about bell hooks. She brought a vital intersectional lens to the table, criticizing the early critical theorists for being too focused on class and overlooking race and gender. Hooks coined the term engaged pedagogy. For her, critical thinking wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was a practice of freedom. She emphasized holistic education, teaching to the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. She famously wrote about the importance of love in the classroom. Now, in academic circles, talking about love usually makes people uncomfortable. It sounds soft. But Hooks wasn't talking about sentimental, Hallmark card love. She was talking about a deep, rigorous care for the student's well-being and growth. She argued that you cannot teach someone you do not respect. Hooks also challenged the classroom power dynamic in a way that even Freire sometimes missed. She pointed out that the classroom is often a place of trauma for students of color and women, a critical pedagogy that doesn't account for the emotional weight of racism and sexism is incomplete. She called for teachers to be vulnerable, to share their own struggles, and to come down from the podium to join the circle. This breaks the hierarchy and makes learning a communal act.